Often remembered as Europe's first major civilization, the enigmatic Minoans made their presence well known, expanding their influence from mainland Greece, known in the Bronze Age as Mycenae, to as far as Egypt to the south, and east as Asia Minor, known today as Turkey. With a long history dating back as far as their beginnings in 3500 BCE to their very gradual dissipation starting in 1500 BCE, these formerly prolific yet currently mysterious people still have left their mark on the Mediterranean world and were forgotten for quite some time after their fall. Welcome back to History's 11, and today we'll be covering 11 facts about the Minoans. The reason we refer to the Minoans by this name stems from the famous ancient Greek myth of the Minotaur. The legend, Minos is the king of Crete, and the way the palace or court complex of Knossos is designed is incredibly labyrinth-like in nature, and how much of Minoan architecture is full of motifs reminiscent of bulls seems to be precisely why these people are currently dubbed the Minoans. It's unknown what they refer to themselves as, though. Given that the Minoans' height of power was nearly 2,000 years before the archaic Greek period, the Minoans seem to be just as mysterious and mythical to them as they are to us, with Crete being seen as a basis for legends rather than actual history. The Minoans had a wide scale of influence thanks to their naval trading network all around the Mediterranean Sea, spanning as far west as Iberia or modern-day Spain. But the bulk of their trading took place in the east. Some Minoan-resembling people are depicted in the Egyptian tomb of Rekhmire in the Acropolis of Thebes. These figures are shown offering gifts. There were inscriptions that describe them, saying that they're from, quote, the island in the middle of the sea, unquote, with said island being none other than Crete. They're distinguished from the average Egyptian because they're depicted with red skin, wearing garments with different colorful patterns, and have long wavy black hair, almost dreadlock-like. The offerings they're depicted with also resemble Minoan pottery. Findings like these indicate that around the time this tomb was constructed, the Minoans had fully entered the ancient Egyptian social fabric. These tomb paintings appear to date between 1479 to 1425 BCE, during the reign of Thutmose III. Just like in many societies, historical and modern alike, religion played a major part in the Minoan lifestyle. These could be in the form of peak sanctuaries found on the rocky mountains of Crete, as the Minoans believed their deities lived, or at least appeared, on mountaintops. Take the Juctus Ridge, for example, where from the right angle, it looks like the profile of a supine giant. But for this fact, let's head east to the city of Zakros. At the site of another peak sanctuary, there was a rhyton used for holding, pouring, or drinking liquids for religious rites. It described a harmonic scene of nature and how divinely peaceful the sanctuary is intended to be, reflecting on how highly the Minoans valued nature. In the largest court complex, or palace, found on the island in Knossos, there's a fresco that's been dubbed the Grand Stand fresco, where it depicts seemingly higher-class Minoan women seated in rows, spectating and chatting. This is likely depicting what being at the theatrical area of Knossos might have been like in its day. Other interpretations seem to point that they were gathered in a tripartite shrine, with throngs of people, mostly men, on the outskirts of the fresco and are uniformly washed in red, while the seated women are brighter and have more variety in their colors of their outfits, drawing the focus on them. The most well-known site on Crete is the Palace of Knossos, as it's the largest Minoan building found, and thus is believed to have been the central seat of function in Minoan society. These words used to describe Knossos dates back to the person who excavated it in the first place, Sir Arthur Evans himself. However, the word palace being used to describe it, and others around the island, like smaller sites of Malia, Zakros, and Phaistos, has come under some criticism. Reason for this criticism stems from him apparently attributing much of what he knew about royal residences in the modern age onto a mysterious culture more than 3,000 years removed, when it's highly likely that their politics and way of life weren't the same as ours is today. Secondly, the layout seemed to have far too many rooms and open spaces to simply call it the seat of royal residence. Other scholars suggest that it was more of a central court for civil functions or religious ceremonies. Others still seem to find the criticisms to be inaccurate, due to some of the rooms being found, like the Queen's Megaron, Lustral Basin, and Grand Staircase, and what looks to be a throne room, which all seem to have much in common with the use of palaces today, as well as any other point in history. These palaces seem to date back to the period in Minoan history known as the Proto-Palatial period, between 1900 and 1750 BCE. It's possible that the Minoan civilization was not only a thalassocracy because of their vast maritime trading network, but also a theocracy. Going back to the throne room, there seems to be a fire bowl at the center of the room, in front of the throne for rituals where the priest, king, or queen would probably be seated. But given how small it is for a real person to sit on for extended periods of time, people could possibly think an effigy in a divine likeness could have been placed there instead. There are also numerous frescoes that depict long processions and artifacts to perform such rituals, one of which being the bull's head writing, carved from a single block of steatite and jasper, which was discovered by Sir Arthur Evans himself at Knossos. All of these suggest how big of a role rituals and religion played in Minoan society. The Minoans were some of, if not the first people to develop a complex water sanitation and distribution system. This is evident with clay pipes, aqueducts, wells, cisterns, rainwater channels, and sanitation tanks in and around Knossos and other court complexes around Crete, like Phaistos and Malia. These complex paths give us an idea just how long humans had a grasp on plumbing and water distribution. Dubbed as the Minoan personality, seems to vastly differ from even some of the oldest cultures we know of, like the Egyptians, who were popularly seen as conservative, strong, and astute, while believing in hierarchies and immortality amongst the divine, or ancient Greeks, who are depicted as articulate, morally upright, and philosophical, but with having a cruel side with their system of slavery and strong stance on war. Though pinning down a solid mental image of people whose traces have been gone from us for well over 3,000 years is difficult to say the least. The most we can do is examine the subjects they appreciated in the form of their art and what we know of other cultural views in nearby places and roughly similar time periods in relation to the Minoans. Based on speculation and research, the Minoans were admirers of nature and the human body. It's no surprise we have most of our knowledge of the Minoans tracing back to Sir Arthur Evans, as he too speculated what the Minoans held in high regard from a social value standpoint. This firmly established 20th century tradition has it that the Minoans were talented, subtle, free-loving, worldly, sophisticated. They were sensitive, elegant, graceful. They loved refined, sumptuous decor, beautiful art objects and jewelry. They loved peace and the rule of law, detesting tyranny and warfare. They had no personal ambition, a trait inferred from the complete anonymity of artists, sculptors, rulers, and military leaders. There were no boastful lists of great achievements or conquests, and no monumental portrait statues of kings of the type found in Egypt. It's completely understandable to take these stances about how the Minoans could have viewed life, because there does seem to be a lack of pieces of art found labeling people and places or emphasizing a central figure, save for a few other pieces. They also love to depict marine life almost as much as the human figure, as they seem to appreciate nature and the little things of life, opposed to always concerning themselves with the divine in their art and architecture. it's no surprise that the Minoans were gifted in naval trading, which was how they developed their Theocracy all around the Aegean in the Bronze Age. They seem to have been getting somewhat of vague mentions in other Greek myths such as Homer's The Odyssey. People known as Phoenicians in the story are, quote, kings of seafaring and sailing galleys with 50 oars. This description sounds exaggerated, but when looking at details on impression seals the Minoans made depicting their boats and comparing them with what Homer leaves us with, it wouldn't be out of the realm of imagination to think these mythological expert seafarers were inspired by the Minoans. No one knows for sure how the Minoan civilization ended, but the theory that's largely accepted by historians is that a volcanic eruption on the island of the Minoan settlement of Thera in 1600 BCE was the catalyst, the sole reason. The Minoans' influence was most certainly weakened, as the pumice buried but preserved almost perfectly much of the settlement of Akrotiri on Thera. This cultural weakening can't be understated, as it left them vulnerable to invasions from their mainland neighbors, known as the Mycenaeans, whose strong military conquered lands surrounding the Aegean around 1450 BCE. But the Minoans didn't simply die off. Instead, they survived well into the Mycenaeans' occupation of Crete, even long enough to influence their art, architecture, and even writing system, with Minoans being known as Linear A and the Mycenaeans basing theirs on the former, known as Linear B. This era became known as the Sub-Minoan period. What others might not know about the settlement of Akrotiri is not only how well preserved it is, and how it's still being excavated even after extended unearthing by Greek archaeologist Spiridon Marinatos in 1967, how it's a possible candidate for the inspiration of Plato's legend of the lost island of Atlantis. The last traces of Minoan civilization ended long before the Archaic Greek period, and it's possible that they had known about the Minoans' existence from the Mycenaeans, the people whom the Greeks descended from. When the Minoans' culture started to fizzle out and assimilate within the Mycenaeans, their traces also began to disappear from us, aspects of their lives living on as hazy ghosts in prototypical writing systems, architecture, and legends. While we may never know about these people, it's always good to remember they haven't been fully lost, as their subtle influence on the wider Greek culture is evident once we put together the clues they left with us in their legends.